What if the brain fog, the exhaustion, the moments where you feel like a slightly dimmer version of yourself, what if none of that was in your head? What if it was, in fact, your head? Not your imagination, not anxiety, not stress, not getting older. Your brain, physically, structurally, changing in ways that most doctors never explain and most women never hear about until it's already been happening for years. Brain imaging studies, including research published in scientific reports and presented at the 2025 annual meeting of the Menopause Society, have now confirmed something that should be in every woman's annual appointment and almost never is. Menopause is not just a hormonal transition. It is a neurological one. The brain changes, measurably, visibly on a scan, in ways that are directly tied to how you think, how you remember, how you feel, and how you sleep. I'm Patricia Novak, a women's cognitive health researcher with over 20 years studying how the female brain ages after menopause. And today I'm going to walk you through 5 brain changes that are happening or have already happened in your brain after menopause. Changes that most women are never told about. Changes that explain symptoms you've been dismissing, minimizing, or blaming on something else entirely. Stay with me through all 5. Because the 5th one, the one we end on, is the one that carries the most urgency, and the one that carries the most hope. Before we start, I want to ask you something directly. Have you been told that what you're experiencing is just part of getting older? That the brain fog, the fatigue, the memory changes are simply what menopause looks like and there's nothing specific to do about them? If that's been your experience, type same in the comments right now, because you're not alone. And what I'm about to share may be the explanation you've been looking for. Brain change number 1. Your brain is literally shrinking in specific regions, not dramatically. Not in a way you can feel directly, but measurably. On a scan. Research using brain scans from 10,873 people in the UK, published and reported in Scientific American in January 2026. Found that postmenopausal women showed lower volumes of gray matter specifically in the entorhinal cortex and hippocampus, the regions most directly involved in storing and retrieving memories, and in the anterior cingulate cortex, which governs emotional regulation. Let me be clear about what that means, because these are not abstract regions. The hippocampus is where your memories form. The entorhinal cortex is how your brain maps the world around you and connects present experience to past memory. The anterior cingulate is why you can manage frustration, regulate emotional responses, and stay calm under pressure. Here's what that looks like in real life. When gray matter volume decreases in these regions, you feel it. You just don't know that's what you're feeling. You feel it as the word that won't come, the memory that slips. The emotional response that feels harder to manage than it used to, the sense that your brain is working harder for the same results. This is where most women miss it, because these symptoms have 100 socially acceptable explanations. Stress, tiredness, too much going on, getting older. But research from the 2025 annual meeting of the Menopause Society, analyzing 5 major studies published between 2020 and 2025, confirmed these are not explanations. They are symptoms of a measurable, structural brain change tied specifically to the hormonal transition of menopause, not to age alone, because the same changes were not observed in similarly aged men. This is happening in your brain, not in your head. Here's what that means practically. Verbal memory, how you recall names, words, and conversations. Visuospatial memory, how you navigate, orient yourself in space, and recognize familiar environments. Both directly tied to the regions where gray matter is decreasing after menopause. Both domains where women over 60 most commonly report noticing changes. This is not speculation. This is visible on brain scans, documented across multiple studies. Consistent across thousands of women. The reason most women don't know this is simple. As Dr. Pauline Maki, a leading researcher on women's cognition at the University of Illinois at Chicago, noted at the 2025 Menopause Society conference, menopause neuroscience remains significantly underfunded. The science exists. The communication of it to women largely does not, which is why you are here, and why this conversation matters. Brain change number 2, your brain's energy supply is being cut off. This is the one almost nobody talks about, and it may be the most important one on this list. Let me simplify it before I explain it. Your brain is the most energy-hungry organ in your body. It consumes roughly 20% of your total energy, despite being only about 2% of your body weight. And estrogen, the hormone you lost at menopause, was directly supporting how efficiently your brain cells produce that energy. Here's what that means in real life. Research published in scientific reports involving brain imaging in more than 150 women found that blood flow in the brain diminishes during the menopausal transition, and that this reduction is directly linked to reduced brain energy metabolism. This is why you feel exhausted in a way that sleep doesn't fix. This is not just tiredness. This is your brain running on less fuel than it's designed for and working harder than it should have to just to get through a normal day. Pay attention to this one, because the same study found something that matters enormously for what comes later in this video. Gray matter volume showed partial recovery in postmenopausal women, and that recovery was directly correlated with preserved mitochondrial ADP production. Translation: the brain has adaptive capacity, but only when it has what it needs to adapt. And here is the piece that connects directly to what you feel in daily life. When your brain's energy supply is compromised, it prioritizes. It directs available resources toward the most essential functions, keeping you alive, keeping your heart beating, keeping your basic systems running. Higher cognitive functions, the complex thinking, the nuanced memory, the sustained concentration, are the first to feel the deficit. This is where most women experience it as an inability to do two things at once the way they used to, as mental exhaustion after tasks that previously felt effortless. As the end of the day feeling heavier than it did 5 years ago. That's not weakness. That's your brain managing a reduced energy supply as intelligently as it can. The question is what you do about it. Brain change number 3. Your brain is desperately trying to compensate, and failing silently. This one is remarkable, and almost no one knows about it. Research from Weill Cornell Medicine, published in scientific reports and using PET imaging technology that had never before been applied to this question, found something unexpected as estrogen levels drop during and after menopause. The density of estrogen receptors in the brain actually increases. Let me simplify what that means. Your brain is not passive in this transition. It is actively fighting back. It is producing more docking stations for estrogen in an attempt to capture as much of the declining hormone as possible. The researchers call this a compensatory response. Your brain, recognizing that something critical is being lost, trying to adapt. And here is where it becomes both remarkable and sobering. This compensatory response was found to persist in women up to their mid-60s. The brain is still trying, years after menopause, to compensate for what it lost. But, and this is the part most women never hear, the same research found that elevated estrogen receptor density in certain brain regions was associated with worse memory performance. Not better. Here's what that looks like in real life. Your brain is working harder to manage a resource that is no longer available in sufficient supply. And that effort itself, that constant reaching for something that isn't there, is producing the cognitive symptoms you've been experiencing. This is where most women get confused, and where everything starts to make sense. The brain fog, the cognitive effort, the mental fatigue, these aren't simply signs that something is wrong. They are also signs that your brain is fighting, that it has not given up, that its adaptive systems are still engaged, and that matters more than you might realize. The question is what you give those systems to work with. That is exactly what the 5th brain change, the one we end on, is about. But first, let me say something about this compensatory response that the research revealed, because it reframes everything. Your brain increasing its estrogen receptor density after menopause is not a sign of failure. It is a sign of intelligence. It is the brain identifying a problem, adjusting its architecture, and working to maintain function under changed conditions. That capacity for adjustment is still present in you right now. It is called neuroplasticity. And it is the reason the 5th brain change carries hope alongside urgency. If you're finding this genuinely useful information you wish someone had shared with you years ago, please subscribe to this channel and hit the bell right now. I publish content like this every week, specifically for women over 60 who deserve real answers. It takes 2 seconds. Subscribe before we continue. Brain change number 4. Your brain's emotional regulation center is under direct pressure. This one explains something that most women experience after menopause, but rarely connect to neurology. The anterior cingulate cortex, identified in the UK study of 10,873 people as showing reduced gray matter in postmenopausal women, is not primarily a memory region. It is an emotional regulation region. Here's what that means in real life. It governs the ability to manage competing demands, to regulate frustration, to maintain emotional equilibrium under pressure. When volume in this region decreases, emotional responses become harder to regulate automatically. Small frustrations feel disproportionate. Situations that used to feel manageable now carry more weight. The emotional buffer that used to operate quietly in the background has become thinner. Sound familiar? This is where most women need to hear something directly. This is not a character change. It is not weakness. It is not you becoming less patient, less resilient, or less capable as a person. It is a measurable, structural neurological change documented in brain scans, consistent across thousands of women, tied directly to the hormonal transition of menopause. And here's something the research shows that most women find deeply validating. The same UK study noted that women prescribed hormone replacement therapy had higher rates of anxiety and depression, not because HRT causes these symptoms, but because women who were already experiencing these symptoms were the ones most likely to be prescribed HRT. The anxiety and depression were present before the treatment, as direct consequences of the structural brain changes. In other words, the women who felt it most clearly were right. If you've been told your emotional changes are psychological, situational, or simply a product of life stress, you have neuroscience on your side. The anterior cingulate cortex does not shrink because of stress. It shrinks because of the hormonal transition that every woman undergoes. And the emotional consequences of that shrinkage are real, neurological, and deserve to be taken seriously, not normalized, not minimized, and not explained away. Brain change number 5. Your brain has a window, and its still openness is the most important thing I will share with you today. And it is the one that carries the most hope. Everything we've covered, the gray matter reductions, the energy metabolism changes, the compensatory receptor response, the emotional regulation pressure, could feel overwhelming. It shouldn't. Because the same research that documented these changes also documented something else: the brain's capacity to adapt and partially recover. The scientific report study found that gray matter volume showed partial recovery in postmenopausal women, and that recovery was directly correlated with preserved mitochondrial energy production and maintained cognitive performance. Here's what that means practically. The brain is not simply declining. It is reorganizing. It is adapting. And under the right conditions, it can recover in measurable, meaningful ways. Research presented at the 2025 annual meeting of the Menopause Society noted that some evidence suggests a partial recovery of gray matter volume postmenopause, potentially reflecting compensatory neuroplastic processes. The brain's capacity to grow new connections and reorganize existing ones in response to the right inputs. The inputs matter. In the words of Dr. Lisa Mosconi of Weill Cornell Medicine, one of the leading researchers in this field, diet, exercise, and sleep have been associated with a gentler menopause for many women and with better preservation of cognitive function. And beyond lifestyle, specific plant-based compounds have been studied for their role in supporting exactly the brain processes that menopause places under pressure. Lion's mane mushroom, studied for its role in stimulating nerve growth factor, the protein that supports neuron survival and the growth of new neural connections. Bacopa monnieri, with published human trials showing measurable improvements in memory recall and processing speed. Ginkgo biloba, documented for supporting cerebral circulation, directly relevant to the blood flow reductions the research identified. Spirulina and chlorella study for their role in reducing neuroinflammation and supporting cellular brain energy production. I've looked carefully at plant-based formulas that combine these specific ingredients in ways that actually reflect what the published science supports. There's one I keep returning to, not because of how it's marketed, but because of what's in it. The link is in the description below. Take a look at the ingredient list, read what the research says about each one, and make your own decision. The window for this kind of proactive support is not closed. It is open, and the research suggests it remains open longer than most women realize. What to do with everything you've learned today? First, understand that what you've been experiencing is real. It is documented. It is visible on brain scans. It has been happening in the brains of millions of women who were told it was just stress, just aging, just part of the transition. It is not just anything. It is a neurological process, and it deserves to be taken seriously by your doctor and by you. Second, protect your sleep. The glymphatic system, your brain's overnight protein-clearing mechanism, is most active during deep sleep. Every disrupted night is a missed cleaning cycle. Prioritize this above almost everything else on your list. The bedroom temperature, the screen curfew, the consistent bedtime, these are not small habits. They are direct inputs into your brain's overnight repair system. Third, move your body. Exercise is the most evidence-supported intervention for stimulating BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the compound most directly responsible for growing and protecting neural connections. 30 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise 5 days a week produces measurable cognitive benefits within weeks, not months, weeks. Fourth, reduce neuroinflammation through diet. The Mediterranean dietary pattern, olive oil, fatty fish, leafy greens, berries, nuts, and legumes, has been consistently associated with slower cognitive decline and better preservation of brain volume in postmenopausal women. Every meal is an input into the neuroinflammatory environment your brain is operating in. And fifth, act now. Not because the situation is desperate, because the window is open. And the research is clear that acting inside an open window produces outcomes that acting outside it cannot. Your brain is not giving up on you. Give it what it needs, and it will give you more clarity, more independence, and more presence than you may have thought possible at this stage. That is not wishful thinking. That is what the research on neuroplasticity, on recovery, on the adaptive capacity of the postmenopausal brain actually says. A final word: you are not losing your mind. You are navigating one of the most significant neurological transitions a human brain undergoes, one that medicine has only recently begun to document and take seriously. The fact that you are here, paying attention, looking for real answers, means you are already inside the window where attention matters most. Which of these 5 brain changes surprised you the most? Tell me in the comments. I read every single response. Share this with a woman in your life who deserves to understand what is happening in her brain. A sister, a friend, a neighbor who has been told it's just menopause and hasn't questioned it yet. This information belongs to all of them. See you in the next video.